had either 3 million apprentices in the country or had 3,000 CEOs in jail. We have neither of those. So there is clearly a shortfall on that front. So all of this points to the challenges on the three E's. There is an challenge on the employment front, which is the matching challenge. There is a demand on one side, supply on one side. How do we bring the two together? There is a mismatch challenge, which is effectively the employability issue, where skill sets don't match the element of the industry ask or the employer needs. And then there is the education, which is relating to the pipeline. What are we churning out over the 10 years, 12 years, and the 15 years of education that people are in? So effectively, I think what we've realized over the years is that the government, the private sector, and the educational institutions have to work on the youth who are coming into the job market. The Digital India, which effectively also enables the multimodal delivery that is possible, because only classroom training or skill development is not going to address the needs of the population in a widespread manner. I think one key initiative which was driven by the Ministry of HRD, the NEEM notification, the National Employability Enhancement Mission, was a path-breaking initiative which was taken by the ministry 18 months back, where they acknowledged the element of learning on the job and earning while they can learn, being a key driver to skill development and integration of education, skill, and employment. That scheme enables the element of students to be on the job earning a stipend and effectively build their vocational capabilities. The Apprenticeship Act changes, like I mentioned earlier, either we get the best way to learn is on the job. Especially on vocational skills and aligning that to industry. So hopefully the various amendments that have happened and will happen to the Apprenticeship Act makes the element of the implementation and partnership from the private sector less draconian and more acceptable and effectively build up. And the whole element of vocational education itself gaining a focus and attention becomes key over a period of time. We clearly need to innovate at the intersection of the three E's, find new recipes rather than throwing more cooks into the kitchen. It is not an element of throwing more resources, but effectively utilizing the resources. Recently I'd taken my daughter for a horse riding lesson, and the instructor told her that, at any point in time, you're never going to be stronger than the horse. So it clearly acknowledged the reality that you're going to learn to ride the horse, taakat se nahi dimag se, which is not by strength, but by using your head. And I think that's really what lies for us ahead, because the problem that we have is not going to have a death by a dagger in the heart. It is going to be death by 1,000 cuts. Focus on that and drive that up in a large way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashok. Ashok has given an introduction. I'd like to make a few points. I think we're dealing with a very complex subject, how to educate people, give them the necessary skills so that when they go out to the labor market, they have something which employees might want or something that they could earn a living. This has always been a challenge because in classical times, in very different historical times, education was for a certain class of people. Education was to create a very polished human being who could live in many countries in luxury or in reasonable wealth without having to work, looking at the finer aspects of life. But the focus is always on creating a very different kind of person, whereas skills came through the guild mechanism, where there were guilds all around the world, where people learned by being apprentices at a very early age, and they learned on the job, and they provided cheap labor to the master, and over a period of time became masters themselves. Now, there was a similar situation in India, where education was for a certain class of people, and we were, being an artisan economy for the last 5,000 years, having various kinds of caste-based guilds, I would say, where people were looking at certain occupations, and then they should educate the children and everybody else. So it went on in a very different way, with some kind of a reservation based upon what caste otherwise you were. So there were very different kind of systems in the Western world and in the Eastern world. It was in the time of the First and Second World War when change started to take place. And especially after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, the Russians created a different kind of society, which is supposedly much more egalitarian. And after the Second World War in the UK, when the Labour government came to power, they started opening up, removing the privileges of the landed gentry and looking at labor in a very different way and creating what they call a welfare state. In the United States, of course, we saw the GI Bill after the Second World War, which was the means of giving education to a very large number of American soldiers who fought in the war, and that created what is called the baby boomers. The growth of the United States after the Second World War is essentially due to the baby boomers who got a high quality education, and the US education system was built up because of huge capacity coming into the system, coupled with the land grant colleges. So the United States followed, and that created a very egalitarian society with a very large middle class, and it became universally accepted that mass education is required, that everybody should have access to higher education, and higher education is a means of coming up the value chain and getting a good living, whether on your own or otherwise. And they set up a very formal skill development system, which is apart from the guild system. Even in Europe, the new system came into being, and we must remember that it is a Bismarck which made sure that Germany transitioned from a very agrarian economy after the unification to a very sophisticated industry-based economy, which had the wherewithal to find two very, very large wars. Japan followed the German system too, because they had a similar training mechanism. So we saw these different kinds of educational, let's say, differentiation come about, and the skills came about all over the world. So when India got independence, I'm told